Okay, so I just got into my car after going on a date, right? And let me just tell you something. I don't know what the deal is with like men now, but I had told him prior that I will be having pre and post date expenses, and is that okay, and are you going to cover them? And I don't know if he wasn't listening or like what the deal was or whatever, but when I handed him the white envelope, he looked shocked, and then he opened it and it's receipts. Hello, pre post date expenses. Hello, like what kind of females do you be dating? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so I handed it to him and he literally looked shocked at me and said, I can't cover this. It was $478 for pre and post date expenses. You asked me on a date, and mind you, we really didn't even have that good a conversation because he was on his phone the whole time, and I have a very strict no phone policy on dates. Hello, you're here to pay attention to me. Look at all the effort that I had to put into going on this date, and now you have a problem with pre and post date expenses? Are you fucking kidding?
Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire generation of men finally says enough is enough? Picture this: a world where men, fed up with decades of being vilified, shamed, and exploited, simply walk away from the chaos of modern relationships, leaving society to grapple with the consequences. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly why men are choosing solitude over suffering. And I've got a twist at the end that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about relationships. So stick around until the very last second. If you're fired up by this kind of no-nonsense truth, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to smash that notification bell and select all to get every single Angry Guy video the moment it drops. Because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's keep this fire burning. Want to take control of your financial future and protect your hard-earned wealth? Check out Angry's Crypto Academy, where I break down everything you need to know about buying, selling, and trading crypto like a pro. It's all about safeguarding your assets and growing your wealth in a world that's trying to take it from you. The link's in the description. Go check it out right now and start building your empire. If you're loving these Angry Guy videos and want to show some support, you can buy me a Red Bull to keep the energy high and the truth flowing. The link's in the description, and every bit helps me keep bringing you the content that cuts through the noise. Now let's dive into the real talk, because what I'm about to lay out is going to hit you like a freight train. We're living in a time where the relationship between men and women is broken beyond repair. And 2025 was the year the veil got ripped off. Women have pushed men to the brink, and men have responded by walking away, not out of weakness, but out of strength, clarity, and self-preservation. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a world where women openly demand payment just for the privilege of taking them on a date, not just covering dinner or drinks, but actual cash up front for their time, their hair, their nails, their makeup. Vague expenses, they claim, are part of the pre-date and post-date process. This isn't a fringe idea anymore. It's a growing trend. Young women are posting videos on social media, bold as brass, saying men need to pay them before they'll even consider sitting across a table. And after the date, they want more money for what exactly? They don't say. It's a vague, ever-shifting list of costs that sounds more like a business transaction than a human connection. This isn't dating, it's a hustle. Women are treating men like walking ATMs, expecting payment for their presence while offering nothing but the chance to maybe, possibly spend time with them. And here's the kicker: they're shocked when men call this out for what it is. They're demanding to be treated like escorts, but without any of the mutual understanding that comes with that arrangement. It's a one-sided deal where men are expected to pay for the honor of being used, and women genuinely can't understand why this feels wrong to anyone. Why? Because their reasoning isn't grounded in logic or fairness. It's driven by feelings, by a sense of entitlement that's been fed for decades. And men are done playing along. This isn't just about dating, though. This is about a deeper, uglier truth that's been laid bare for all to see. Female nature, as men are now understanding it, isn't what we were told it was. For years, society sold us the idea that women are nurturing, empathetic, and loving by default. But 2025 pulled the curtain back, and men are seeing something else entirely. Women are openly complaining about their husbands, hating them for the crime of sleeping, for daring to rest, for getting sick and needing a moment to recover. Videos are popping up on platforms like TikTok where women vent their resentment, saying they can't stand watching their husbands take a break because, in their minds, a man's only purpose is to serve them endlessly. They don't see men as human beings with needs, flaws, or limits. They see them as machines that exist to provide. And when those machines dare to act human, when they rest, when they falter, women turn on them with contempt. This isn't love. This isn't partnership. This is a one way street where men are expected to give everything and receive nothing but criticism in return. Men are waking up to this reality, and they're not just hurt, they're angry. They're seeing that the love they were promised was a lie, that the women they devoted themselves to don't actually value them as people. And so they're walking away. Let's talk about how we got here. For 50 years, men have been under siege. Feminism, which started with promises of equality, morphed into something else entirely. A weapon used to demonize men and boys for simply existing. Think about it. Terms like manspreading were invented to shame men for sitting comfortably in a chair. Women turned natural behavior into a crime, accusing men of taking up too much space, of being inherently oppressive just by being themselves. The hashtag Me Too movement, which began with good intentions, was twisted into a witch hunt where accusation became conviction, and men's lives were ruined without evidence or due process. Family courts, divorce courts, civil courts, criminal courts all became tools to extract wealth and power from men, leaving them broken and destitute. Women harassed men in public spaces, filming them at the gym or on the street, posting those videos online to shame them for daring to glance in their direction or say hello. They wore outfits so revealing they'd be out of place anywhere but a nightclub, then cried foul when men noticed. They turned paternity fraud into a game, lying about the fatherhood of children to trap men into financial servitude. They created online groups like Are We Dating the Same Guy? And apps like The T, where they shared private details about the men they dated, weaponizing that information to destroy reputations and social standing. They demanded expensive dates, free meals, and cash payments, all while offering no real chance at a relationship. And when men dared to push back, women labeled them toxic, pathetic, or villainous, casting themselves as powerful victims who could do no wrong. This was chaos by design, a deliberate campaign to break men down and drive them out of society. But here's the thing about men: they're not as fragile as women thought. After decades of being told they're not needed, that their masculinity is toxic, that they're the source of all the world's problems, men have finally listened. They've heard the message loud and clear, and they're acting on it. They're walking away, not out of spite, but out of survival. Men have realized that being alone doesn't mean feeling alone. They've made peace with themselves, learned to accept who they are, and discovered something profound. Relationships with women, as they exist today, are shallow and one sided. Women love to say they are the table, that their presence is enough, but men are seeing through that. They're recognizing that women create chaos in relationships and society, not because they're evil masterminds, but because it's how they seek validation and attention. It's not about building something together, it's about keeping men off balance, always chasing, always proving themselves. Men are done with that game. They're choosing to focus on what makes them happy, whether it's their work, their hobbies, or simply the peace of a quiet life. And in doing so, they are finding a kind of freedom they never knew was possible. This shift is seismic, and the numbers back it up. By 2030, 45% of women aged 25 to 44 are projected to be childless. That's not a random statistic, it's a direct consequence of men opting out. Men are done with marriage, done with dating, done with the endless demands and double standards. They've seen female nature for what it is, and they're not sticking around to be used anymore. Women, meanwhile, are starting to feel the consequences. You see it all over social media: women posting tearful videos, begging men to come back, demanding that men date them again, complaining that life is too hard without men's support. They're realizing that the world they created, the one where men were pushed away and told they weren't needed, is a world they can't survive in. But men aren't listening anymore. They're not falling for the tears or the guilt trips. They're trusting their own eyes, their own experiences, their own pattern recognition. They see the game for what it is, and they're choosing to play a different one where they prioritize their own happiness, their own peace, their own lives. And here's where it gets really interesting. Men walking away isn't just about relationships, it's about rebuilding themselves. Men are naturally minimalist. They don't need much to be content. A simple life, free of drama and demands, is luxury to them. They're stripping away the things that don't serve them: toxic relationships, societal expectations, the pressure to be something they're not. They're focusing on what brings them joy, whether it's a quiet evening with a good book, a challenging project at work, or a solo trip to clear their mind. This isn't about running away, it's about rediscovery. For the first time in decades, men are asking themselves what they want, not what women or society demand of them. And the answer is clear: they want peace, they want simplicity, they want to live on their own terms. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. This is the Men Walking Away movement, MWA, and it's growing every day. Men are no longer shielding women from the harshness of reality. They're letting women face the world they demanded, and they're thriving in the process. Let's pick up where we left off, because this story is only getting started. Men walking away isn't just a reaction, it's a revolution, a quiet but unstoppable shift that's reshaping the world as we know it. For too long, men have been the backbone of society, carrying the weight of expectations, demands, and blame without complaint. They've built the world, fought the wars, and protected everyone else from the harsh realities of life. But now they're done. They've seen the truth about female nature, about the systems designed to exploit them, and they're choosing themselves for the first time in generations. This isn't about anger or vengeance, it's about clarity. Men are waking up to the fact that the game is rigged, and they're refusing to play by rules that guarantee their destruction. They're not begging for a seat at the table anymore. They're building their own table, one where they set the terms. And women who spent decades telling men they weren't needed are now staring at the consequences of their own actions, wondering why the world they demanded is so cold and unforgiving. Think about what men have endured to get to this point. For 50 years, they've been told their very existence is a problem. Every aspect of masculinity, strength, ambition, even the way they sit, has been pathologized, turned into a crime. Women created terms like toxic masculinity to shame men for being men, as if confidence or assertiveness were sins. They pushed narratives that painted men as predators, oppressors, or useless relics of a bygone era. In workplaces, men were passed over for promotions because of quotas that prioritized gender over merit. In schools, boys were punished for being energetic or competitive, drugged into compliance with medications to dull their natural instincts. In relationships, men were expected to provide endlessly: money, time, emotional labor, while receiving nothing but criticism or betrayal in return. Women used the legal system like a weapon, leveraging divorce courts to strip men of their assets, family courts to deny them access to their children, and false accusations to ruin their reputations. And through it all, men were told to man up, to take it in stride, to prove their worth by sacrificing more. But sacrifice for what? For a society that despises them? For women who openly resent them? Men have asked themselves these questions, and the answers have led them to one conclusion: it's time to walk away. This awakening didn't happen overnight. It's been brewing for decades, fueled by countless moments of betrayal and disillusionment. Picture a man who works 60 hours a week to provide for his family, only to come home to a wife who berates him for not doing enough around the house. Imagine a young guy who saves up for months to take a woman on a dream date, only to be ghosted because he didn't pay for her nails or send money to her Cash App first. Think about a father who loses everything in a divorce: his home, his savings, his kids, because his ex wife decided she was unhappy and the court sided with her without question. These aren't hypotheticals, they're the lived experiences of millions of men. And those experiences have piled up one after another until the weight became unbearable. Men started comparing notes, sharing their stories online, in forums, in private conversations. They realized they weren't alone. They saw the patterns of manipulation, entitlement, and double standards. They recognized that women weren't the victims they claimed to be. They were often the architects of the chaos. And once men saw that truth, they couldn't unsee it. That's when the walking away began. But what does walking away look like? It's not always dramatic. It's not always a guy packing a bag and disappearing into the wilderness, though some do that, and more power to them. For most men, it's quieter, more deliberate. It's a refusal to engage with the nonsense. It's saying no to relationships that demand everything and give nothing. It's opting out of marriage, knowing the legal system is stacked against them. It's choosing not to date, not because they can't, but because the cost outweighs the benefit. It's focusing on their own goals, building a business, mastering a craft, traveling the world without the burden of someone else's expectations. Men are rediscovering the power of solitude, not as a punishment, but as a gift. They're finding that a life without drama, without constant demands, is a life of freedom. They're learning that happiness doesn't come from chasing women or societal approval, it comes from within. And as they embrace this, they're thriving in ways they never thought possible. Let's talk about the women in this equation because they're not sitting quietly while men walk away. Oh no, they're noticing and they're not happy about it. Social media is flooded with videos of women lamenting the state of their lives. They're crying about how hard it is to survive without men's support, how lonely they are, how unfair it feels that men aren't lining up to date them anymore. Some are begging, pleading for men to come back, promising to be better. Others are doubling down, demanding that men step up, pay up, or face the consequences. They're posting about how men owe them dates, owe them money, owe them attention, because in their minds, their presence is a gift that men should be grateful for. But the men aren't listening. They've heard these promises before, seen the crocodile tears, and they know better. They've learned that words are cheap and actions tell the real story. Women had their chance, decades of chances, in fact, and they used those chances to push men away. Now, as men build lives of peace and purpose, women are left to face the world they created, and it's not a pretty sight. This isn't just about individual women, though. It's about a broader cultural shift, one that's been engineered by decades of feminist ideology. Feminism sold women a lie that they could have it all: careers, independence, endless validation without needing men. It told them men were optional, that masculinity was a flaw to be fixed. It encouraged women to see themselves as victims, always oppressed, always entitled to more. And women bought into it, hook, line, and sinker. They pushed men out of their lives, out of their homes, out of society itself, believing they could thrive on their own. But reality has a way of catching up. Women are now facing skyrocketing costs of living, stagnant wages, and a world that's far less forgiving than they expected. They're discovering that independence isn't as glamorous as it was sold to be. And as they struggle, they're turning to social media to vent, to demand, to manipulate, anything to avoid taking responsibility for the choices that led them here. But men aren't coming to the rescue this time. They're too busy building their own lives, too focused on their own happiness to care about the noise. Let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. Society is fracturing, And the collapse of relationships between men and women is at the heart of it. When men walk away, they're not just leaving women behind. They're withdrawing from the systems that rely on their labor, their sacrifice, their compliance. Families aren't forming because men aren't marrying. Birth rates are plummeting because men aren't fathering children. Economies are stuttering because men aren't spending their money on dates, weddings, or family expenses. This isn't a small thing, it's a civilizational shift. And women who were told they could replace men with careers or government support are starting to see the cracks in that promise. The welfare systems they leaned on are straining under the weight of demand. The corporate jobs they chased are cutting hours or automating roles. The dating apps they relied on for validation are drying up as men delete their profiles and move on. Women are waking up to a harsh truth. Men were the glue holding society together, and without them, the whole thing starts to crumble. But here's the part that really drives the point home: men aren't suffering in this new reality, they're thriving. When men walk away, they're not retreating into despair. They're reclaiming their power. They're keeping their money, their time, their energy for themselves. They're investing in their passions, their health, their future. They're buying homes instead of engagement rings, traveling the world instead of paying for overpriced dinners, building legacies instead of chasing fleeting approval. Men are minimalist by nature, and they're stripping their lives down to the essentials: peace, purpose, and freedom. They're not worried about what women think anymore because they've seen through the lies. They're not afraid of being called names, toxic, selfish, whatever, because they know the truth about who they are. And that truth is liberating. Men are finding joy in the simple things: a quiet morning, a hard day's work, a life free of chaos. This is what the men walking away movement is all about. Men choosing themselves, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Now let's address the elephant in the room: the women who say men are wrong for walking away. They'll argue that men are abandoning their responsibilities, that they're weak for not sticking it out, that they're the problem for not meeting women's demands. But let's flip that script. Who created the conditions that drove men away? Who spent decades demonizing men, shaming them, exploiting them? Who turned relationships into transactional games where men always lose? Women had a hand in this, maybe not every woman, but enough to shape the culture we're in. They cheered when men were kicked out of their homes, when boys were told they were defective, when masculinity was branded as evil. They didn't speak up when men were suffering. They doubled down, demanding more. And now, when men choose to protect their peace, women want to cry foul. That's not accountability, that's entitlement. Men don't owe women their lives. They don't owe women their labor, their money, or their attention. They owe themselves a chance to live well. And that's exactly what they're doing. This brings us to a critical point: the black pill lens. Men are seeing the world differently now. They're not hoping for a fairy tale ending where women suddenly change and everything goes back to the way it was. They're not holding out for a savior to fix society. They're looking at reality, cold, hard, observable reality, and making decisions based on what they see. The black pill isn't about despair, it's about clarity. It's about recognizing that female nature, shaped by evolution and culture, leans toward chaos and self interest. It's about understanding that women's demands, whether for payment before dates or endless validation, aren't anomalies. They're features, not bugs. Men are accepting this, not with resentment, but with resolve. They're saying, okay, this is how it is. Now, what's best for me? And the answer is clear: walk away, build your own life, let women deal with the world they wanted. That's not cruelty, that's consequence. Let's dive deeper into this seismic shift, because the men walking away movement, MWA, isn't just a trend, it's a reckoning. Men have spent generations playing by rules that were never designed to let them win, sacrificing their dreams, their health, and their peace for a society that spits in their face. They've been providers, protectors, and problem solvers, only to be told they're the problem. But now in 2025, the fog has lifted. Men are seeing the world for what it is: a rigged game where their worth is measured by what they can give, not who they are. And they're done. They're not begging for scraps anymore. They're not chasing approval from women or society. They're walking away, heads held high, and building lives that prioritize their own happiness. This isn't about giving up, it's about waking up. It's about men realizing that the only way to win is to stop playing a game that's stacked against them. And as they do, they're leaving behind a world that took them for granted, forcing everyone else to face the consequences of a society without men. Picture the average man's life before this awakening. He wakes up at dawn, drags himself to a job he tolerates, and pours his energy into providing for others. He pays for dates, for dinners, for gifts, hoping to earn a woman's affection, only to be told he's not enough, not rich enough, not tall enough, not exciting enough. He marries, thinking he's building a partnership, only to find himself in a one sided deal where his needs are ignored and his mistakes are weaponized. He fathers children, pouring his heart into raising them, only to have a court strip him of his rights because his wife decided she wanted a better option. He's shamed for his ambitions, mocked for his struggles, and punished for his biology. Every step of the way, he's told to give more, to try harder, to prove himself. And when he dares to rest, to take a moment for himself, he's met with resentment. Women roll their eyes when he's sick, scoff when he's tired, and demand he keep going because, in their minds, his only purpose is to serve. This was the reality for millions of men, a relentless grind with no reward, no gratitude, just an endless list of demands. Is it any wonder they've had enough? Now, let's contrast that with the life men are choosing today. When men walk away, they're not retreating into misery, they're stepping into freedom. They're waking up each morning without the weight of someone else's expectations. They're keeping their money, not because they're greedy, but because they've learned it's better spent on themselves than on ungrateful takers. They're pursuing their passions, whether it's starting a business, mastering a skill, or simply enjoying a quiet hike, because they've realized their time is too valuable to waste on chaos. They're living minimally, not out of necessity, but by choice, stripping away the clutter of toxic relationships and societal pressure. A man who walks away might spend his evenings reading, gaming, or working on a project that lights him up, not arguing with a partner who thrives on drama. He's not lonely, he's content, he's not lost, he's found. This is the power of MWA, men rediscovering who they are when they stop living for others and start living for themselves. But let's not pretend this choice comes without pushback. Women aren't taking this quietly. They're flooding social media with complaints, tears, and demands. They're posting videos about how men are failing them by not dating, not marrying, not stepping up to fill the void they created. They're crying about how hard life is now, bills piling up, loneliness creeping in, dreams of family fading away. Some are trying guilt, saying men are abandoning their duty to society. Others are doubling down on entitlement, demanding men pay for their time, their beauty routines, their very existence. They're acting as if men owe them a solution to problems they caused, as if men's lives exist to bail them out. But men aren't buying it anymore. They've seen the playbook: tears to manipulate, anger to control, promises that never materialize. They know these are tactics, not truths. And they're not falling for it. They're too busy building lives of purpose to care about the noise. Women wanted independence, they've got it. Now they're learning what it really means. This isn't just about individual choices, though, it's about a cultural earthquake. For decades, feminism sold women a fantasy that they could thrive without men, that relationships were optional, that their value was inherent and required no effort. It told them to demand more, to expect everything, to see men as tools rather than partners. And women listened. They pushed men away, shamed them, used them, and celebrated when systems like divorce courts or social media mobs tore men apart. They created a world where men were disposable, where masculinity was a flaw to be erased. But they didn't think through the end game. They didn't realize that men are the ones who keep society running, the builders, the fixers, the ones who step into the breach when things fall apart. Now, as men walk away, the cracks are showing. Businesses are struggling because men aren't spending on dates or families. Communities are fraying because men aren't volunteering or leading. The birth rate is tanking because men aren't starting families. Women are facing a world they weren't prepared for, and they're scrambling to shift the blame. But men aren't listening. They're too focused on their own paths to care about the chaos they left behind. Let's tell a story to drive this home. Imagine a guy named Mike, a regular dude in his 30s. Mike spent his 20s doing everything right. He worked hard, climbed the ladder at his job, saved up for a house. He dated, treated women with respect, paid for dinners, planned thoughtful outings. But every relationship ended the same way, with demands he couldn't meet, criticism he didn't deserve, or betrayal that cut deep. One girlfriend used him for free meals, ghosting him after he paid for an expensive weekend trip. Another cheated, then blamed him for not being attentive enough. By the time Mike hit 30, he was burned out. Then came the final straw. A woman he was dating demanded he pay her $200 up front for a date to cover her prep costs. Mike laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. That was the moment he saw the truth, not just about her, but about the game itself. He deleted his dating apps, stopped chasing, and started focusing on himself. He took up woodworking, turned his garage into a workshop, and started selling custom furniture. He traveled to places he'd always wanted to see. He spent his evenings with friends who valued him, not with women who saw him as a resource. Mike's not angry anymore, he's free. And he's not alone. There are millions of Mikes out there walking away and finding peace in a world that tried to break them. Now let's flip the perspective. Imagine a woman named Sarah, same age, same city. Sarah grew up on the promises of modern feminism. She was told she could have it all: a career, independence, a perfect partner who'd meet her every demand. She focused on her job, climbed the corporate ladder, and enjoyed the attention of men who chased her. She didn't settle because why should she? The world told her she was enough just as she was. She dated, but only men who could afford her lifestyle: expensive dinners, gifts, trips. She posted about her standards on social media, laughed at men who didn't measure up, joined groups to share dirt on guys she dated. But now in her 30s, things are different. The men she used to dismiss aren't calling anymore. Her dating apps are a ghost town. Her career, while successful, doesn't fill the void of loneliness. Her friends are busy with their own lives, and the family she thought she'd have feels further away than ever. Sarah's starting to panic. She posts videos venting about how men aren't stepping up, how life is unfair, how she deserves better. But deep down, she knows the truth. The world she was promised doesn't exist. The men she pushed away aren't coming back. And the independence she was sold is starting to feel like isolation. Mike and Sarah are two sides of the same coin, a society divided by its own choices. Mike represents the men who've seen through the lies, who've chosen peace over chaos. Sarah represents the women who believed the fantasy, who thought they could thrive without men until reality proved otherwise. This isn't about gloating or revenge, it's about consequences. Women like Sarah spent years telling men like Mike they weren't needed, that their masculinity was a problem, that their sacrifices were owed. They used social media to shame men, courts to drain them, and culture to vilify them. They created a world where men had no reason to stay. And now, as men walk away, women are left to navigate a reality they weren't prepared for. The irony is stark. The same women who demanded independence are now begging for men's attention, while the men they dismissed are thriving without them. This dynamic is playing out everywhere, and it's reshaping the future. By 2030, nearly half of women aged 25 to 44 will be childless, a statistic that screams louder than any social media rant. That's not an accident. It's a direct result of men opting out. Men aren't marrying because they know the risks. Divorce laws that favor women, courts that strip them of everything, a culture that punishes them for being husbands. They aren't dating because the cost, emotional, financial, psychological, outweigh the benefits. They aren't starting families because they've seen what happens to fathers who lose everything on a whim. And as men step back, society is starting to feel the strain. Schools are emptier, communities are weaker, economies are slower. Women are turning to government programs, but those are buckling under the weight of demand. The safety nets women counted on are fraying, and the men who once held things together are nowhere to be found. This is what happens when you tell half the population they're disposable. They listen. But let's be clear, men walking away isn't about abandoning responsibility, it's about redefining it. Men are taking responsibility for themselves, their happiness, their goals, their well being. They're saying, if society doesn't value me, I'll value myself. They're building lives that don't depend on women's approval or society's validation. They're finding purpose in their work, their hobbies, their friendships. They're proving that a man's worth isn't tied to what he can do for others, but what he can do for himself. This is the heart of MWA, a movement of men who've stopped apologizing for who they are and started embracing it. They're not angry, they're resolved. They're not lost, they're liberated. And as they walk away, they're showing the world what happens when you push good men too far. We're now at the heart of this story, and it's time to dig into the raw truth of why the Men Walking Away movement, MWA, is gaining so much traction. Men aren't just stepping back from relationships, they're rejecting a system that's been bleeding them dry for decades. They've spent their lives being told they're the problem, that their instincts, their desires, their very existence is somehow wrong. They've been vilified for sitting too wide, for speaking too loud, for daring to exist as men in a world that's decided masculinity is a disease. But men are done apologizing. They're done bending over backward to meet demands that never end. They're seeing through the lies, the manipulations, the double standards, and they're choosing a path that leads to peace, not pain. This isn't a tantrum or a phase, it's a calculated decision rooted in the hard lessons of reality. Men are walking away because they've realized that the only way to protect their sanity, their wealth, and their future is to stop playing a game designed to destroy them. And as they do, they're exposing the fragility of a society that thought it could thrive without them. Let's paint a picture of what this looks like on the ground. Imagine a man in his late 20s. Let's call him James. James grew up in a world that told him he had to prove himself at every turn. He watched his father lose everything in a divorce, his home, his savings, his kids, because his mother decided she wasn't fulfilled anymore. James went to college, worked hard, and landed a decent job. But he noticed something. No matter how much he achieved, women always wanted more. He'd take a woman out, pay for everything, plan a perfect evening, only to be told he didn't vibe right or wasn't ambitious enough. One date asked him to Venmo her $150 before they even met to cover her time and effort. Another posted about him online, twisting a casual conversation into something sinister just to get likes and sympathy. James started to see the pattern, not just in dating, but everywhere. At work, he was passed over for promotions because of diversity quotas. In social circles, he was mocked for being too traditional or not woke enough. Everywhere he turned, he was expected to give, to sacrifice, to conform. And for what? To be discarded the moment he wasn't useful anymore. So James made a choice. He stopped dating. He focused on his career, his gym routine, his love for classic cars. He started saving his money, not for some woman's approval, but for his own dreams. James isn't bitter, he's liberated. And there are millions of Jameses out there quietly walking away and finding joy in a life they control. Now let's look at the other side of this equation, because women are feeling the heat and they're not shy about it. Social media is a circus of women venting, crying, and demanding answers. They're posting videos about how men aren't stepping up, how they're tired of being single, how life is too hard without a partner to lean on. They're lamenting the lack of good men, as if men are just sitting in a warehouse somewhere, waiting to be activated. Some are getting creative, demanding payment for dates, arguing that their time is a commodity men should pay for upfront. They're framing it as empowerment, as if turning relationships into transactions is some kind of feminist victory. But let's call it what it is: desperation. These women are realizing that the world they were promised, a world where they could thrive without men, where their value was automatic and unquestioned, isn't real. They're facing rising costs that stagnant wages and a loneliness that no career or social media following can fix. And instead of looking inward, instead of asking what role they played in this mess, they're doubling down, blaming men for not rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices. But men like James, they're not listening. They've heard the sob stories before, seen the tears turn to demands, and they're not falling for it anymore. This clash isn't just personal, it's cultural, and it's tearing at the fabric of society. For decades, women were fed a narrative that they could have everything without compromise. Feminism told them they didn't need men, that they could be independent, that their worth was inherent and required no effort to maintain. It encouraged them to see relationships as optional, to treat men as accessories rather than partners. And women bought it. They pushed men away, shamed them for their masculinity, used them for resources, and celebrated when systems finds like family courts or social media mobs crushed men's lives. They created terms like manspreading to criminalize natural behavior, turned hashtag #MeToo into a weapon to destroy reputations without evidence, and made paternity fraud a casual sport. They demanded expensive dates, free meals, and cash payments, all while offering no real commitment in return. They built online echo chambers to share gossip about men, to ruin their names, to control the narrative. And through it all, they told men they weren't needed, that masculinity was toxic, that the future was female. Well, the future is here, and it's not what they expected. Women are waking up to a world where men have taken them at their word and walked away. Let's talk about the consequences because they're not small. When men walk away, they're not just leaving women behind, they're withdrawing from the systems that depend on their participation. Marriage rates are plummeting because men know the risks. Divorce laws that favor women, courts that strip men of their assets and children, a culture that paints husbands as oppressors. Birth rates are collapsing because men aren't starting families, wary of a system that punishes fathers and rewards betrayal. Economies are slowing because men aren't spending their money on dates, weddings, or family expenses. Think about it. Every dollar a man doesn't spend on a woman is a dollar he's investing in himself, his home, his hobbies, his future. That's billions of dollars staying out of the consumer economy, billions that used to prop up industries from restaurants to jewelry to real estate. Women are turning to government programs to fill the gap, but those systems are buckling. Welfare, housing subsidies, healthcare, they're all stretched thin, unable to keep up with the demand. The safety nets women counted on are unraveling, and the men who once held society together are no longer there to catch the pieces. But here's the flip side, and it's what makes this story so powerful. Men aren't suffering in this new reality, they're thriving. When men walk away, they're not retreating into despair, they're reclaiming their lives. They're keeping their money, not out of selfishness, but because they've learned it's better spent on their own goals than on someone who doesn't value them. They're investing in their passions, whether it's learning a new skill, traveling the world, or simply enjoying a quiet evening with a good book. They're building communities with other men who share their values, not based on competition or status, but on mutual respect and understanding. They're discovering that happiness doesn't come from chasing women or societal approval. It comes from within. Men are minimalist by nature, and they're embracing that. They're stripping their lives down to what matters: peace, purpose, freedom. They're not worried about being called toxic or selfish because they know the truth about who they are, and that truth is setting them free. Let's tell another story to bring this to life. Meet Tom, a 40-year-old electrician. Tom spent his 20s and 30s doing everything society asked. He married young, worked overtime to provide for his wife and two kids, and dreamed of a stable, happy life. But his wife grew distant, started fights over nothing, and eventually filed for divorce, claiming she needed to find herself. The court gave her the house, half his savings, and primary custody of the kids. leaving Tom with a tiny apartment and monthly payments he could barely afford. He saw his children once a month, if he was lucky. His ex posted online about her new chapter, while Tom struggled to rebuild. Then he found online communities where men shared similar stories. He realized he wasn't alone, that his experience wasn't a fluke, but part of a larger pattern. So Tom made a choice. He stopped dating, not because he hated women, but because he couldn't trust the system. He focused on his work, started a side business fixing vintage appliances, and reconnected with old friends. He saved enough to take a solo trip to Alaska, something he'd always dreamed of. Tom's not angry anymore. He's content. He's not looking back, he's moving forward. And he's part of a growing army of men who found peace by walking away. Now, contrast that with Lisa, a woman Tom's age. Lisa grew up believing she could have it all: a career, a family, a life of endless options. She dated in her 20s, always holding out for someone better because the world told her she deserved perfection. She mocked men who didn't meet her standards, shared their flaws in group chats, and enjoyed the power of being desired. She focused on her career, climbed the ranks, and bought into the idea that men were optional. But now in her 40s, Lisa's world is different. The men she used to dismiss aren't around anymore. Her dating profiles get no matches. Her career, while impressive, doesn't fill the void of a quiet house. Her friends are married or distant, and the family she thought she'd have feels like a fading dream. Lisa posts videos online, venting about how men aren't man enough to date her, how society has failed her. She's angry, but beneath that anger is fear that the life she was promised was a lie. Lisa's story isn't unique. It's the story of countless women who believed they could thrive without men, only to find that independence comes with a cost they weren't prepared to pay. This dynamic, men thriving, women struggling, is the core of the MWA movement. Men are seeing through the cultural lies, the feminist narratives, the promises that never materialized. They're recognizing that female nature, shaped by evolution and amplified by culture, leans toward chaos and self interest. Women's demands for payment before dates, for endless validation, for men to fix their lives are not exceptions. They're the rule. Men are accepting this, not with resentment, but with clarity. They're saying, this is how it is, so what's best for me? And the answer is to walk away, to build a life that doesn't depend on women's approval or society's validation, to focus on what brings them joy, not what drains them. This isn't about hating women. It's about loving themselves enough to say no to a system that's been using them for too long. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because this isn't just about individuals, it's about the future. When men walk away, they're not just changing their own lives, they're reshaping society. The decline in marriage and birth rates is already causing ripples: fewer families, fewer children, fewer workers to support an aging population. Economies are feeling the pinch as men spend less on consumer goods and more on themselves. Communities are weakening as men withdraw from roles they once filled: volunteers, mentors, leaders. Women are turning to social media to vent, to demand, to manipulate, but it's not working. The men they're calling out to aren't listening. They're too busy living lives of purpose, lives they've chosen for themselves. And as society grapples with these changes, one thing is clear: men walking away isn't a trend, it's a transformation. It's a new era where men are finally putting themselves first, and the world will have to adjust. The Men Walking Away movement, MWA, isn't just a quiet exodus, it's a tidal wave crashing over a society that thought it could dismiss half its population without repercussions. Men have stopped playing the game, stopped feeding into a system that demands their sacrifice while offering nothing but scorn. They've seen the truth about female nature, about the cultural and legal traps set to exploit them, and they've chosen peace over chaos. But while men are thriving in their newfound freedom, women are staring down a future that's growing bleaker by the day. The consequences of men walking away are not abstract or distant, they're immediate, harsh, and undeniable. Women who spent decades pushing men out, shaming them, and demanding a world where they could thrive without them, are now grappling with the reality of that world. It's not the utopia they were promised. It's a landscape of economic hardship, social isolation, and cultural collapse, and women are woefully unprepared for what's coming. This isn't about gloating, it's about laying bare the fallout of a society that thought it could function without men's contributions. Let's start with the economic consequences because they're hitting women hardest and fastest. For years, women leaned on men's financial support, whether through dating, marriage, or family structures, while feminism told them they could replace that support with careers or government programs. But men walking away has pulled the rug out from under that illusion. Men are no longer spending their money on dates, gifts, or lavish lifestyles to impress women. They're not footing the bill for engagement rings, weddings, or family homes. Every dollar they keep is a dollar not flowing into the consumer economy, and that's billions of dollars evaporating from industries that women indirectly relied on. Restaurants, retail, beauty, and travel sectors are feeling the pinch as men prioritize their own needs over performative spending. Women, meanwhile, are facing a cost of living crisis that's spiraling out of control. Rent, groceries, healthcare, everything is more expensive, and wages aren't keeping up. The corporate jobs women were told would make them independent are increasingly unstable, with layoffs, automation, and gig work replacing the security they expected. Government safety nets, like welfare or housing subsidies, are stretched to the breaking point, unable to handle the surge in demand from women who can't make ends meet. The economic cushion men once provided, whether through direct support or broader societal contributions, is gone, and women are left exposed to a financial reality that's unforgiving and relentless. This economic fallout is compounded by a stark demographic shift. By 2030, projections show 45% of women aged 25 to 44 will be childless, a direct result of men opting out of marriage and fatherhood. Women who assumed they could delay family life, banking on men being available when they were ready, are finding the dating pool has dried up. Men aren't lining up to marry or start families anymore, not because they can't, but because they see no reason to risk their lives in a system that punishes them for it. Divorce laws favor women, stripping men of assets and access to their children, while cultural narratives paint husbands and fathers as expendable. Men have taken note and they're saying no to the trap. For women, this means a future without the family structures they were told they could have on their terms. The dream of a partner who provides emotional and financial stability, of children who bring joy and legacy, is slipping away. Women are facing the prospect of aging alone without the support of a spouse or the fulfillment of motherhood. The social media posts crying about loneliness, the videos begging men to step up are just the tip of the iceberg. The real consequence is a generation of women staring down decades of solitude with no one to share the burdens or joys of life. Socially, women are losing the networks that once sustained them. Men were often the glue in communities, organizing events, volunteering, leading initiatives, because their drive to build and protect extended beyond their homes. But as men walk away, they're withdrawing from these roles. They're not coaching youth sports, not mentoring young people, not stepping into the gaps society relies on them to fill. Women who were told they could replace these contributions with their own independence are finding it's not that simple. Community organizations are faltering, local events are dwindling, and the sense of connection that holds society together is fraying. Women are turning to online spaces to fill the void, but social media is a poor substitute for real world bonds. The echo chambers of TikTok and Instagram offer validation, not solutions, and the constant cycle of venting and demanding only deepens their isolation. Women are discovering that the sisterhood feminism promised is shallow. When push comes to shove, it's every woman for herself. Without men's stabilizing presence, social cohesion is crumbling, leaving women to navigate a world that feels increasingly fragmented and hostile. Culturally, the consequences are even more profound. Women were sold the idea that they could redefine relationships, that they could demand everything money, attention, commitment without offering anything in return. They were told their presence was enough, that men should be grateful for the chance to serve them. But men walking away has shattered that delusion. The dating market is collapsing as men delete their apps, ignore the demands for pre-date payments, and refuse to engage with women who see them as resources rather than partners. Women are facing a reality where their standards, once celebrated as empowerment, are now liabilities. The high value men they chased are either gone or uninterested, leaving women to compete for a shrinking pool of suitors who meet their criteria. The cultural narrative that women are inherently valuable, that they are the table, is being exposed as a lie. Value, it turns out, isn't automatic, it's earned through mutual respect, effort, and accountability. Women who bought into the idea that they could thrive by manipulating, shaming, or exploiting men are now seeing the cost, a culture that's turning its back on them just as they turn their back on men. The psychological toll of these consequences is immense. Women are grappling with a sense of betrayal, not just by men, but by the ideology that promised them everything. Feminism told them they could have independence, power, and fulfillment without compromise, but the reality is far uglier. They're facing rejection, not from individual men, but from an entire system that's recalibrating without them. The validation they once got from social media likes, from men chasing them, from a culture that celebrated their demands, is drying up. Women are left with a gnawing sense of irrelevance, a fear that their lives won't matter in the way they were told they would. This isn't just about loneliness, it's about existential dread. The videos of women crying online, the posts demanding men return, are symptoms of a deeper crisis, a realization that the world they were promised was a fantasy, and the one they're living in is cold, competitive, and unforgiving. Without men to shield them from these realities, women are confronting the full weight of their choices, and it's breaking them. Economically, socially, and culturally, women are also losing the safety nets they took for granted. Men were the ones who historically stepped into danger, whether physical, financial, or emotional, to protect others. They worked the dangerous jobs, fought the wars, and took the risks that kept society stable. But men walking away means fewer are willing to play that role. Women are now exposed to the raw edges of reality. Crime rates rising in cities, infrastructure crumbling, systems failing, without the buffer men once provided. The government programs women turn to are overwhelmed, unable to replace the direct support men offered through families or communities. The workplace, which women were told would be their salvation, is proving to be a treadmill, endless hours, stagnant pay, and no guarantee of security. Women are discovering that independence often means struggling alone, with no one to fall back on when things go wrong. The safety they assumed would always be there, the stability men quietly maintained, is gone, and women are left to face a world that's far less forgiving than they imagined. The ripple effects extend to the next generation, and this is where the consequences grow even darker. With fewer men willing to marry or father children, the family unit, the bedrock of society, is eroding. Women who want children are finding it harder to make that dream a reality, not just because men are opting out, but because the systems that support families are weakening. Schools are underfunded as tax bases shrink, childcare is unaffordable, and communities are less safe without the presence of engaged men. Women who do have children are facing these challenges alone, without the partnership they were told they wouldn't need. The single mother households that feminism celebrated are struggling under the weight of economic and emotional strain with no relief in sight. The children growing up in these environments, often without fathers, are more likely to face poverty, instability, and a host of social issues, perpetuating a cycle of hardship that women can't escape. The future women envisioned, one of thriving families and empowered legacies, is being replaced by a reality of fractured homes and uncertain prospects. The cultural narrative is shifting too, and women are losing their grip on it. For years, women controlled the conversation through social media, mainstream media, and feminist ideology, painting men as the problem and themselves as victims. But men walking away has disrupted that narrative. Men are no longer engaging with the shaming tactics, the accusations, the demands for accountability. They're not arguing or defending themselves, they're simply leaving. This silence is deafening. It's stripping women of the power they once held to manipulate the cultural story. The hashtags, the viral videos, the public shaming campaigns, they're losing their impact because men aren't playing along. Women are left shouting into a void, their complaints echoing back without response. The culture they built, one that celebrated their demands and vilified men, is collapsing under its own weight. And women are facing a world where their voices carry less influence, where their demands are met with indifference, where their carefully crafted image of empowerment is fading into irrelevance. The global implications are staggering. As men walk away in Western societies, the effects are reverberating worldwide. Economies that relied on Western consumer spending, driven in part by men's contributions, are slowing. Developing nations, which look to the West for cultural and economic models, are seeing the fallout of a society without men's engagement. Women in these regions, who are beginning to adopt the same feminist ideals, are watching the consequences unfold and questioning the promises of independence. The decline in birth rates is creating a demographic crisis that threatens pensions, healthcare systems, and workforce stability, not just in the West, but globally. Women who were told they could lead this new world order are finding themselves at the forefront of a collapse they didn't anticipate. The interconnectedness of global systems means that the consequences of men walking away aren't confined to one country or culture. They're reshaping the world, and women are bearing the brunt of that transformation. The psychological and emotional consequences for women are perhaps the most enduring. Without men's presence, women are losing the validation they were taught to expect. The attention economy of social media, which thrived on men's engagement, is faltering as men log off and focus on themselves. Women are facing a future where their worth isn't automatically affirmed, where they have to compete in a world that no longer prioritizes their demands. This is creating a crisis of identity. Women were told they were enough just by existing, but reality is proving otherwise. The confidence they were sold is crumbling, replaced by doubt, anxiety, and a sense of being left behind. The mental health challenges are mounting, with women reporting higher rates of loneliness, depression, and disconnection. The promise of empowerment has given way to a reality of struggle, and women are left to navigate this without the emotional or practical support they once took for granted. Ultimately, the harshest consequence for women is the loss of agency they thought they had. Feminism promised them control over their lives, their relationships, their futures. But men walking away has revealed how fragile that control was. Women's power was tied to men's participation, to their willingness to engage, to provide, to chase. Without that, women are left with a world that's indifferent to their demands, a world that doesn't bend to their will. They're facing the reality that true agency requires accountability, effort, and mutual respect, things they were told they didn't need. The systems they relied on, courts, media, culture, are losing their ability to prop them up. The men they pushed away aren't coming back to fix it. Women are now tasked with rebuilding a world they helped break, and the tools they were given, entitlement, victimhood, manipulation, are proving useless. This is the legacy of a culture that thought it could thrive without men, and women are the ones who will live with the consequences for generations to come. As we reach the final stretch of this journey, let's turn the spotlight on the most powerful outcome of the Men Walking Away movement, MWA, the unparalleled freedom men are now embracing. For decades, men have been shackled by a society that demanded their sacrifice, their silence, and their submission. They've been told their worth lies in what they can provide, not who they are. They've been vilified for their instincts, punished for their ambitions, and expected to serve without question. But now in 2025, men are breaking those chains by walking away from toxic relationships, rigged systems, and a culture that despises them. Men are stepping into a new era of liberation. This isn't just about opting out, it's about opting in to a life of purpose, peace, and self determination. Men are discovering that freedom isn't found in chasing approval or meeting endless demands, it's found in choosing themselves, in building lives that reflect their values, not society's distortions. The Men Walking Away movement is a revolution of the soul, and the freedom it brings is transforming men's lives in ways they never thought possible. This freedom starts with the most fundamental resource, time. When men walk away, they reclaim the hours, days, and years they once spent navigating the chaos of modern relationships. No longer are they wasting evenings on dates that lead nowhere, jumping through hoops to meet impossible standards, or arguing with partners who thrive on drama. They're not spending their weekends chasing women who see them as resources or appeasing a culture that shames them for existing. Instead, men are using their time to pursue what lights them up. They're diving into hobbies that ignite their passion, whether it's crafting, gaming, or exploring the outdoors. They're investing in their careers, not to prove their worth to someone else, but to build wealth and security for themselves. They're traveling to places they've always dreamed of, not to impress a partner, but to expand their own horizons. This reclamation of time is a game changer. It's the difference between a life spent serving others and a life spent shaping one's own destiny. Men are no longer clocking in for a system that exploits them. They're punching out and living on their own terms. Financial freedom is another cornerstone of this liberation. Men walking away are keeping their money, and that's a radical act in a world that's been bleeding them dry. For years, men were expected to foot the bill for dates, for weddings, for family expenses, while women demanded more and offered less. They were pressured to spend beyond their means, to prove their value through lavish gestures, to sacrifice their savings for someone else's lifestyle. But now men are saying no. They're not paying for pre-date prep costs or sending cash to a woman's app just for the chance to talk. They're not buying engagement rings or funding homes they'll lose in a divorce. Every dollar they keep is a dollar they can invest in themselves. Men are buying property, starting businesses, or saving for early retirement. They're spending on experiences that enrich their lives, trips, gear, education, not on fleeting attempts to win approval. This financial independence isn't just about wealth, it's about power. It's about men having the resources to live life on their terms, without the constant threat of a court, a partner, or a culture draining them dry. This is freedom in its purest form, control over one's own future. Emotional freedom is perhaps the most profound gift men are gaining. For too long, men have been emotional punching bags, expected to absorb criticism, resentment, and manipulation without complaint. They've been told to man up when they're hurting, to suppress their needs for the sake of others, to endure betrayal, and still come back for more. Relationships with women, shaped by a culture that celebrates entitlement, have been minefields of drama and double standards. But by walking away, men are stepping out of that battlefield. They're no longer tethered to partners who demand endless validation while offering none in return. They're not navigating the chaos of women who create conflict to seek attention or who punish men for being human. Instead, men are finding peace in their own company, in friendships with others who value them, in communities that respect their worth. They're learning that emotional stability doesn't come from external approval, but from internal strength. This freedom allows men to feel what they feel: anger, joy, sadness, without shame or judgment. It's a liberation of the heart, a chance to live authentically in a world that tried to strip them of their humanity. This emotional freedom extends to mental clarity, a state men are rediscovering as they distance themselves from societal noise. The culture has bombarded men with contradictory messages: be strong, but not too strong; be sensitive, but not weak; provide, but don't expect gratitude. It's been a psychological cage designed to keep men off balance, always striving, always apologizing. But men walking away are breaking free from that cage. They're tuning out the shaming tactics, the accusations of toxic masculinity, the demands to conform to a world that hates them. They're focusing on what makes sense: observable reality, not manipulated narratives. This clarity allows men to see through the lies, that they're not the problem, that their instincts are not flaws, that they don't owe anyone their lives. They're embracing a black pill lens, not out of despair, but out of wisdom. They're recognizing that female nature, shaped by evolution and culture, leans toward chaos and self interest, and they're choosing not to engage with it. This mental freedom is transformative. It's the difference between a life of confusion and a life of purpose, between being a pawn in someone else's game and being the master of one's own. Physical freedom is another dimension of this liberation. Men are no longer tying their health and vitality to the demands of others. For years, they've sacrificed their bodies, working grueling jobs, skipping rest to provide, ignoring their health to meet expectations. Relationships often added to this toll, with stress from constant conflict or pressure to perform taking a physical hit. But men walking away are prioritizing themselves. They're hitting the gym, not to impress women, but to feel strong and alive. They're eating better, sleeping more, and taking care of their bodies because they value their own longevity. They're not burning themselves out to fund someone else's lifestyle or to prove their worth. This physical freedom is about reclaiming energy, about living in a body that's strong, capable, and ready for the adventures men choose for themselves. It's about hiking mountains, lifting weights, or simply waking up without the weight of stress crushing them. This is a freedom that radiates outward, giving men the confidence to face the world as their best selves. The freedom to create is another gift men are unwrapping. Men have always been builders, whether it's constructing homes, inventing technologies, or shaping ideas that change the world. But for too long, their creative energy has been diverted into serving others' agendas. They've built families, businesses, and communities only to have their efforts taken for granted or weaponized against them. Now, men are channeling that creativity into projects that matter to them. They're starting companies, writing books, crafting art, or mastering skills that bring them joy. They're not doing it for applause or validation. They're doing it because it fulfills them. This creative freedom is about ownership, men owning their ideas, their work, their legacy. It's about building something that can't be taken away by a divorce court, a social media mob, or a culture that devalues them. This is the freedom to leave a mark on the world, not because society demands it, but because men choose to. Social freedom is reshaping how men connect with the world. For years, men were pressured to fit into social molds, be the provider, the protector, the good guy who never steps out of line. They were expected to maintain relationships that drained them, to appease women who demanded constant attention, to conform to a culture that punished nonconformity. But men walking away are rewriting those rules. They're choosing who to let into their lives: friends who lift them up, communities that share their values, networks that respect their boundaries. They're not chasing status or popularity. They're building authentic connections based on mutual respect. This social freedom means men can say no to toxic people, no to drama, no to anyone who doesn't add value to their lives. It's about surrounding themselves with those who see them as equals, not resources. This is a freedom that creates space for real brotherhood, for bonds that aren't about competition but about shared purpose. The freedom to dream is perhaps the most exhilarating. Men have spent generations putting their dreams on hold, sacrificing their ambitions to provide for families, to meet societal expectations, to chase relationships that never fulfilled them. But now men are dreaming again, and they're dreaming big. They're setting goals that reflect their deepest desires, whether it's traveling the world, building a legacy, or simply living a life of quiet contentment. They're not asking for permission or approval, they're pursuing what sets their soul on fire. This freedom to dream is about possibility, about imagining a future that's theirs to shape. It's about waking up each day with a sense of excitement, knowing that every choice they make is for themselves. Men are no longer living for someone else's script. They're writing their own story, and it's a story of triumph, resilience, and joy. This multifaceted freedom, time, money, emotions, mind, body, creativity, social bonds, dreams is creating a new kind of man. He's not the caricature society painted, the toxic villain, the pathetic loser, the expendable worker. He's a man who knows his worth, who values his peace, who lives with purpose. He's not angry, he's resolved. He's not running away, he's running towards something better. The Men Walking Away movement has given men the tools to redefine masculinity on their terms, to reject the lies that held them back, to embrace a life that's authentically theirs. This freedom is not just personal, it's collective. Men are inspiring each other, sharing their journeys, building a movement that's stronger than any cultural narrative. They're proving that a man's value isn't in what he gives to others, but in what he creates for himself. This is the legacy of MWA, a generation of men who chose freedom over bondage, who chose themselves over a world that tried to break them. As men embrace this freedom, society is being forced to reckon with the void they leave behind. The systems that relied on men's labor, sacrifice, and compliance are faltering. The economies that thrived on their spending, the communities that leaned on their leadership, the relationships that depended on their patience, they're all crumbling. But men are not looking back. They're too busy living lives of purpose, too focused on the freedom they've earned. They're not here to fix a world that rejected them. They're here to build a new one man at a time. This is the power of walking away, not just escaping the old, but creating the new. Men are no longer the Atlas holding up the world. They're the architects of their own destinies, and the world will have to adjust to a reality where men's freedom comes first. What do you think about this? Do you agree with the Men Walking Away movement and the freedom it's bringing men? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. I want to hear what you're thinking. If this video resonated with you, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear this truth. And just remember, all roads lead to MWA, Men Walking Away. Cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.